You know, sometimes I think I'm a broken record, but I can't tell you how important using visual supports are. Um, I have an overhead projector here. People still use those, but whiteboards, anything that you can do that gives that child a visual support. I really like using whiteboards and overheads and active boards because you can write as you go. So, you know, we talked about visuals. You have to prepare visuals ahead of time, and that's why teachers don't use them as much, because you can't run what you brung. But when you're using visual support such as overheads and whiteboards, you can write keywords in as you go. You can write directions as you go. So that helps give them visual supports without a lot of pre-planning. Also, giving the models, as I mentioned earlier, everybody should be on this page, or let's work this problem together. Really watching for attention, stress, and fatigue, because those kinds of hints will often be the aura between the big issues, or the key to the fact of they're not getting these things for this reason. So I'm very keyed in, especially to shoulders. You know, I find that most children with autism will show me anxiety by raising their shoulders. So I really watch shoulders to see if they're down, if they're relaxed. If I see that kind of hunching starting, if their hackles kind of start to raise, I know that I need to do something to help that out. Give them a good positive comment. Let them take a break. Let them use a different marker, something to kind of break their attention on their stress. So we talked about cues last week. Please remember that visual instructions are the keys to independence. So when you're talking about how to make them more independent, you have to give more visual supports and less auditory supports. Give specific roles when you do collaborative work or collaborative grouping. Tell them you're going to be the recorder, or you're going to be the timer. These are some things that you can say. These are, this is what you need to write down. Let them know what they need to do, and then they're a little more independent, because remember, they're not going to infer what they're supposed to do. Assign peer buddies. I think peer buddies are one of the best things we can do to help independence, but it needs to be planful. You know, not just the little girl who likes to nurture and help. You know, we really need to be planned and avoid burning out that one nurturing little student, and give them enough information to help. And we'll talk more about that in our peer lecture later on. So I talked about giving a purpose to work. I had one little girl who never wanted to write. You know, writing's never children with autism's favorite thing to do, in the beginning anyway. And so we did all of her lessons as if they were an email to her sister at college, and she really liked that, and that gave her a purpose to her work, and her sister learned all about what she was learning in school. We also know that children with autism do better if there is a set beginning and a set ending, or a set amount of work to do. Indefinite amounts are a little difficult for them. And also consider keyboard use for writing assignments. We're going to talk more about that in the next slide. Writing is so difficult for children with autism on so many levels. One, sometimes the actual motor planning is difficult for them. Forming the letters, spacing the letters. Remember, there's a lot of starting and stopping when you're writing, so consequently you're using a lot of executive functioning, so you're having to plan an awful lot. Then the other part of it is the tactile part of holding a writing instrument and then having your arm go across many different kinds of feelings. All of those kinds of things influence writing. Additionally, writing is thinking on paper, is language on paper. So they have to manipulate and organize language, and it's really very daunting for a visual thinker who's who's trying to translate what they see visually and put it into English. The last part is writing is communication. So you really have to think of your audience when you're writing. You have to consider their perspective when you're writing, and that changes the tone of your writing, what you include, what you don't include, and that's very difficult for children with autism. So there's so many things going on that I start early teaching them how to be really good on a keyboard if they can, because once they get to paragraph writing, essay writing, things for standards, it's really difficult for them to write and do all of this together. Plus, when you get to revisions, they don't want to start over again and rewrite something they already did. But if you can save it under draft 1 and then do it draft 2 on a little computer, then that works. You know, we used to use Alpha Smarts, but Alpha Smarts have really small screens, whereas the smaller little laptops seem to be great and work really well. Let's talk about things that we can teach the student to help with organization. Day planners are just a must. I start with a visual schedule as soon as they hit the door, and then I teach self-management of that visual schedule, and then as we get better, they learn to write down their homework assignments in it and all of those kinds of things. We have to teach independent use as quickly as possible, and that needs to be a part of what we do all throughout. You know, I think of experiences I've had with my own daughter and her friends when at middle school they kind of threw a planner at them and none of them really knew how to use it, and we really had to go through and figure it out. Well, we certainly can't do that with children with autism. Again, it's such a help to them to have their schedule in front of them, what their expectations are. You know, you can use a daily planner where they have a section for Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith likes you to sit here. You can't turn your homework in unless you raise your hand. You know, all those kind of rules that are in their daily planner that are a reminder when they get to Mrs. Smith's class really, really help. Lots of times I use a daily schedule that is just laminated, so I can use water-soluble markers and then just have them wash it off at the end of the day. Something all teachers seem to enjoy and seems to help with organization is using color-coded subjects. So English is all red. The folder is red. The book jacket on their textbook is red. When you're writing on the whiteboard, you're writing in red ink or a red marker. And then science may be green, etc., etc. All that helps them know what they're supposed to be looking for. You know, if you look at an elementary school whiteboard, there's all different things all over the place. If they know, oh, I'm in reading or I'm in English and I need to look at the red, that really helps them. Also helps with them gathering up their homework. I know I have science homework, I need my science book, things like that. So color coding each folder, even in middle and high school, is very, very helpful. Activity schedules and supplies for each subject in the pocket, and sections in the folder that are labeled. Just like you would label your classroom, label their sections. I also put all their things in one place that they really like. If I have a child who I can use their obsessive stuff as a reinforcer, but I always put instructions on it. So say I have a child that really loves maps, I may put a map in a pencil holder, you know, one of those zippered ones with instructions on the outside. You may look at maps for 5 minutes when all your work is done. And I think this is really important. One, it acts as a reinforcer, but it always also teaches them the discipline to only be thinking of maps when it's time to think of maps. So I do that frequently. I also use sticky notes quite a bit. for the announcement that comes up during the day. Oh, Mrs. Smith is out today, so you're going to have a substitute in PE. So I'll write that down on the sticky note and I'll stick it on the desk. This really helps for those children who are recurringly asking questions to reassure themselves when there's a transition or a change. We've all had them, I'm sure. Marianne's not here today? No, Marianne's homesick. She'll probably be back tomorrow. Then 5 seconds later, Marianne's not here today? And so you can just write down, Marianne's not here today. She's home. She'll probably be back tomorrow, and put it on his desk. And then when he asks the repeated question, you can go by and tap it. So pretty soon they learn to self-manage their anxiety about Marianne by reading that. Sometimes I'll even have them fold it and put it in their pocket if we're going to PE or something like that. I've really worked hard with some children about when to take home what texts and really to get on homework, put in huge programs. And with some children, it's just get 2 sets of texts. I'm telling you, you spend so much emotional time and energy trying to get that going, and I'm not sure it's worth it sometimes. Some kids get it, but if after really lots of effort, don't be afraid to say, okay, 2 sets of texts. Have consistent written rules for the student. Remember that the rules written up on the board won't always be internalized as their rules. They may need their own set of rules in their notebook. Use technology as much as possible. That is really the key to their independence. So teaching them to keyboard, using a pulse pen, using things that really help support their listening issues and their comprehension issues. And we'll talk about lots of those as we go through the class.